Hi folks, my name is Gerdes. I'm just a professor trying to help you understand context in the war in Ukraine. I saw this the day before yesterday and I thought, wow, that's really interesting. So President Lukashenko of Belarus gave himself immunity from prosecution and bars potential challengers. So this is not the kind of act that you do if you don't think that you're guilty. If you think that you're guilty, this is the kind of thing that you would definitely want to do. In the same way that if my children, when they were little, if they were going to swipe a cookie, they wouldn't just take a cookie and start eating in front of me. They would take a cookie if they knew that they shouldn't do it. That's what I'm saying. They would take a cookie and then somehow put it behind their back and then walk backwards as if they usually walk backwards. I don't know. I mean, like, they're not thinking through this. Okay, let's look at the article and see what Lukashenko did. President Lukashenko of Belarus has signed a new law giving himself lifelong immunity from criminal prosecution and preventing opposition leaders living abroad from running in the future presidential elections. Okay, so if you give yourself immunity from prosecution for what you've done, if you've done something, you don't otherwise need to do something like that. The law theoretically applies to any former president, but of course he's been in power for 30 years, right? So, and members of his or her family, which is a very weirdly constructed law. Well, whatever you've done, if you are a former president, you can't be prosecuted for it. In reality, it's only relevant to 69-year-old Lukashenko, who has ruled Belarus with an iron fist for almost 30 years. Like, he's actually a more successful dictator than Putin. He's had more dictatorial power, and he's been in power much longer. The country's next presidential election, which is to take place in 2025, is on its way. So it's 2024 now, and we are going to see another, well, he's gearing up for that by using this law to bar potential rivals that might be really potent. The law significantly tightens requirements for presidential candidates and makes it impossible to elect opposition leaders who fled to neighboring countries in recent years. Now, why would they flee to neighboring countries? Well, because they thought if they stayed, bad things might happen to them, which it could in Belarus. I've been to Belarus. It's a very, very strange, it's more, it's one of the few places on earth that's really still like in a Soviet mindset. It's like Cuba, North Korea, and Belarus are like probably the leaders in that sense. Okay, only citizens of Belarus who have permanently resided in the country for at least 20 years and have never had a residence permit in another country will be eligible to run. So this means anybody who got out of Dodge because they thought that they were in danger are no longer eligible. Okay. Belarus was rocked by mass protests in August 2020 during Lukashenko's widely disputed re-election for a sixth term. The West condemned it as fraudulent. Putin was backing it, and like it was bad. Like this, he had protests like he's never seen before. This is pictures of the protest. Belarusian authorities detained more than 35,000 people, many of whom were beaten at protest or tortured in custody. Large number left the country altogether, fearing reprisals. Lukashenko has also been accused of involvement in the illegal transfer of children from Russian-occupied towns in Ukraine. Now, I covered this the other day, and I said, well, this is a real significant problem. It's still going on. Now, if he's trying to pardon himself from something like that, his own national law is not going to protect him from international law if the ICC decides that he's a war criminal for his role in whatever he's doing with Ukraine. According to the text of the new law, Lukashenko, were he to leave power, quote, cannot be held accountable for actions committed in connection with exercising his presidential powers. So he's trying to expunge the record or excuse himself from anything that he's done while he was the president. The law also says the president and members of his family will be provided with lifelong state protection, medical care, life, and health insurance, which is good if you can get it. Of course, the people of Belarus don't necessarily have the same kind of cushion. After resigning, the president would also become a permanent, lifelong member of the upper house of parliament. Like, this guy's got some chutzpah. I've got to give him that. Opposition leader Stefanchenko, who fled to neighboring Lithuania in 2020, said the new law is Lukashenko's response to, quote, his fear of an inevitable future, unquote. And I think she's right. I think that that's exactly right. He knows that he's done wrong. He knows that he could be prosecuted on the backside once he loses power, which is why he's making himself immune, which is why he's making himself part of the upper house. Yeah, it's a really interesting scenario, suggesting that Lukashenko must be concerned about what happens to him when he leaves power. Lukashenko, who ruined the fates of thousands of Belarusians, will be punished according to international law. So even if he does this kind of thing, I don't think he can evade international law. Okay, so that story is fascinating because you don't do this kind of thing unless you know that you're guilty. Just like the stealing a cookie, you don't put it behind your back and then walk away in a weird way unless you know that you shouldn't be stealing that cookie. Okay, tell me what you think here. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, the comments, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.